When we talk about how the cross saves us, sometimes it can seem a little bit impersonal. When we talk about sacrifice and God taking the punishment for us, it almost feels like some sort of economic exchange or something very functional and legal, where God does this and then we're now given freedom and liberty. There is a very different way of understanding it, which becomes much more personal. And it's often been spoken of as this idea of transforming love. That when we look upon the cross, God does take our sins. He does carry our burdens. He does pay the price. But on a much more personal level, he loves us. And in the way of us actually taking this personally and really uniting ourselves with what Jesus has done, I think this is probably the most beautiful way of understanding it. Really what this comes down to is, I think, an understanding that all of our sin comes from the fact that we are craving love. The deepest hunger of the human heart is love. Ever since we left the Garden of Eden, it's like we've been looking for some way to get back home. We know we're made for something and we're trying to find our way of how to get there. And this is where all our relationships become so disordered. We find ourselves fighting and manipulating and controlling people, trying to find some way of filling that emptiness, that deep need inside of us. And so if only we can discover a love that is able to penetrate that deep emptiness, suddenly the desire for sin starts to vanish. It dissolves. And so this is the understanding of how the cross can save us and really heal us in a very personal way. If we start to look at the cross and the sacrifice of Jesus in this sense of him loving us unto the end. It actually says this in John chapter 13, where just as Jesus is about to begin the Last Supper, it says, having loved those who were with him in the world, he loved them unto the end. And there it begins, the journey to the cross. And so even there, John is trying to show to us that there is a very deep sense here where God is feeding our deepest need. The one who is the bread of life, the one who is given to us in the Eucharist, also comes to satisfy that deep loneliness, that deep yearning and hunger for something more. And in doing so, he heals that deep brokenness of our identity. When we come to understand the cross in this way, it really starts to transform us because we realize just how much his love is shown through mercy. Very often we can look at love in a sense that we somehow have to earn it or deserve it. We like to be loved because of our strength, because of our talents and our gifts. And that's easy to be loved in our strength because we know that somehow it's something of our own doing or something of our own achievement. But to be loved purely in mercy, when someone loves you in your weakness and your brokenness, that can be quite hard to receive because we're no longer really in control. We haven't created it or we haven't earned it or deserved it. And we realize that we're now dealing with a love that is so much deeper. But it's also a love that is very healing. When you know that someone can look at you and they know everything about you, they know exactly why you don't deserve to be loved, and yet they still sacrifice themselves for you. That is a love which starts to transform us. All the reasons why we are unlovable actually start to become transformed. The bad parts of our character, the bad parts of our personality, the ways in which we are selfish and impatient and irritable, we suddenly find that these things start to be healed and transformed because we see that we are loved in our brokenness and our mess. And this is really how the power of the cross starts to heal us every day of our life. We know that in our baptism, the power of the cross came to us and gave us the grace of salvation. But as we come and meditate upon the cross every day, we see how the cross starts to heal us and sanctify us slowly, bit by bit, every day. as Jesus comes and loves us in our worst behaviors, in those parts of our life where we know we just simply don't deserve it. The more that we meditate upon that grace, the more that we meditate upon how much we don't deserve that mercy, there his love starts to untangle the chaos that's inside of us. And it starts to calm the storms that rage inside of our soul. And we find that we're actually able to be at peace once again. We're able to be at peace with ourselves and our own identity because we know that we're loved. Now, this is an image that comes through very powerfully on the day of the resurrection. When the disciples are hiding in the upper room in John's Gospel, and Jesus appears in their midst, and he says to them, "Peace be with you." And then he shows them his hands and his side, and he says once again, "Peace be with you." Now, I've always thought that's a little bit strange, that at the most dramatic moment in the whole of the Gospel, the only thing Jesus has to say is peace. And yet it is so profound, because in showing them his hands and his side, it's almost like he's showing them the true reality of what dwells inside their hearts. The violence, the chaos, the hatred against God and against each other, all of that is symbolized in the wounds that are now upon his body. And yet he now says to them, the war is over. The battle is over. I've now conquered everything. You are now free. And all there is peace. And so all the shame that they carry, all the fear suddenly dissolves in that moment, because they realize that they're standing before someone who completely loves them and accepts them. They know they don't deserve it. They've done nothing to earn it. And yet that love starts to penetrate and transform them deeply. And so this is where the cross saves us every day. The more we come to meditate upon the love, the grace, and this undeserved mercy, we start to realize that he is gradually healing the deep wounds within us. He is feeding the deep hunger within us. And he's starting to renew our identity, starting to speak to us of who we truly are as sons and daughters of God.